Story 1. After leaving me and our kids for his online hot girlfriend, my husband disappeared for 8 years. Now he's back claiming he has an offer for me. I, 40F, am feeling conflicted about a recent decision I made regarding my family and would like to know everyone's opinion. To start with, my life turned upside down 8 years ago when my husband, Robert, suddenly announced that he was leaving me and the kids. He had met a hot chick online and fallen in love with her. His decision came out of nowhere and left me devastated. Robert had been acting distant and strange for weeks leading up to the revelation, but I had brushed it off as work-related stress. We had been married for over a decade and had stuck by each other through thick and thin. I had known him for half my life, and we had built a family together. The possibility of infidelity had never crossed my mind. One evening, Robert finally confessed that he had met someone. Those words broke my heart. He blurted out that the woman's name was Isabella, and she was the hottest woman he had ever seen. He had been talking to her for the past 3 months, and they had formed a connection that made him realize he was unhappy in our marriage. Every word he spoke cut through me like a knife, and I felt a mixture of anger and despair swirling in my stomach. He continued to reassure me that he still loved us, but he couldn't deny his feelings for Isabella. He insisted that he needed to meet her in person to see if it was going to go somewhere. I was overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions, unable to make sense of what was happening, and it felt like the walls of our home were closing in on me. My voice quivered as I asked him if he was leaving us and the children for this woman. He nodded slowly, saying that although he didn't expect me to understand, he needed to do this for himself. He had given it a lot of thought, and he was going to go to meet her and start a new life. He told me that he was ready to support us financially as much as he could, but he needed to follow his heart and meet the love of his life. The world came crashing down around me. I just couldn't believe that my husband was leaving me and our kids for someone he had never met in person. My first instinct was to scream, to plead, to do anything to make him stay. But I looked at his face and I knew that he had already made his choice and there was no turning back. Robert moved out the following week, leaving me to explain to our children that their father wouldn't be coming back. Emily, at 9 years old, had 1,000 questions, but I had no answers. Nathan, who was only 4 years old then, couldn't fully grasp the magnitude of the situation and clung to me as if he knew that something was terribly wrong. I felt numb and shattered during this time, and my children were the only thing that kept me from drowning in my sorrow. When I first told my family about Robert, they had the same reaction as me. They just couldn't understand why on earth my husband of so many years would do something like this. My parents wanted me to pursue this legally, but at that point in my life I didn't have a lot to go on, and I still believed my husband would come back to us. Robert's parents looked utterly helpless and broken when they found out their son had left us. They called him multiple times, pleading with him to return to us, but he told them the same story. Eventually, days turned into weeks and weeks into months. I was left to pick up the pieces both for my sake and for the kids. Our family and friends rallied around us, offering support and a shoulder to lean on. I focused on finding a job so I could provide a stable environment for Emily and Nathan, but the pain of my husband's betrayal lingered. During this time, Robert's parents helped me a lot by offering help financially and babysitting the children if I ever needed a break. 8 years have since passed, and Robert's presence in our lives has dwindled to nothing more than a distant memory. He used to send us money periodically, but other than that, he never contacted me or the children. I have pretty much become a single mother over the years, working tirelessly to provide for my children and give them the love and attention they deserve. Although Emily occasionally remembered her father, she eventually stopped trying to contact him and learned not to bring him up. In contrast, Nathan's recollection was far hazier, so he never even mentioned him. They both have grown up to become remarkable individuals despite the pain of losing their father. Recently, Robert's father passed away unexpectedly, and we all attended his funeral. Later, his family lawyer informed us that he wanted to talk to me regarding his will. The lawyer explained that Robert's father had left some money for his grandchildren. While it wasn't a substantial amount, it could help cover my kids' college expenses. I sat down with my children and shared the news that they wouldn't need to fret over college expenses anymore. Their faces lit up with joy, and witnessing their happiness was truly heartwarming. It felt like a weight had been lifted, knowing that we had one less concern on our plate. After a long period of uncertainty, it finally felt like everything was coming together in our lives. Last week, I received a call from an unknown number. To my surprise, it was Robert on the other end of the line. There was a rush of conflicting emotions, and I was speechless to hear his voice after 8 years. He hesitated before telling me that he wanted to meet me urgently. I was confused, so I asked him to clarify. He admitted that he wanted to discuss an offer with me and kept pleading with me that he had to see me. I couldn't understand why he was calling me now after so many years when he didn't bother contacting me before. His repeated pleas were difficult to ignore, so I took a moment to gather my thoughts and finally agreed to meet with him alone, albeit cautiously. The rendezvous was set, and we decided to meet at a cafe near my office. As I hung up the call, a whirlwind of questions and uncertainties filled my mind, leaving me anxious about meeting him after 8 years. I decided not to tell my kids anything until after I met him to see what was the offer he kept talking about. The days leading up to our scheduled meeting were a roller coaster of emotions. I couldn't help but replay the past in my mind, recalling the pain of Robert's sudden departure, the struggles of raising our children alone, and the years of trying to come to terms with his abandonment. On the day of our meeting, I arrived early, nervously sipping my coffee as I waited for Robert. It wasn't long before he walked in, approaching me with a mix of hesitation and determination. I noticed he looked older, worn, and somehow different from the man I had married. Our initial exchange was filled with awkward silences and tentative words. We avoided the elephant in the room, focusing instead on polite greetings and catching up on the years that had passed. It was as if we were two strangers trying to navigate the remnants of a past life. Eventually, Robert gathered his courage and began to explain the reason for his sudden reappearance in our lives. He spoke about how Isabella didn't turn out to be the woman he thought she was. It turns out she was actually a single mother herself, but had never revealed the truth to him until he had left us and was standing in front of her doorstep. Their relationship faced numerous challenges, mainly stemming from her gambling addiction, which led her to squander all of his money. They argued frequently, but Robert had chosen to stand by her, hesitant to give up on someone else again. However, when his father passed away recently, he realized how short life was to remain in an unhappy situation every day. He spoke about how much he missed everyone back here and was disappointed with the choices he had made 8 years ago. Robert continued, saying he had thought several times over the years of coming back to us but didn't have the strength to face us. He then revealed that his father had bequeathed him their lake house, which was this huge property where we used to go for vacations back before Robert left us. He told me he wanted to sell the house, which would allow him to be set for the rest of his life. I nodded quietly, listening to him. Robert then dropped a bombshell. He proposed that he wanted to come back to us and give our children a luxurious life. He assured me that I would never have to work again in my life if I accepted him back into our lives. I stared at him in disbelief as he assured me we could live the rest of our lives without worrying about money. Basically, Robert wanted us to reconcile and give our family a second chance, using the inheritance to build a better life together. I weighed Robert's words carefully, understanding the potential benefits that the inheritance could bring to our family. However, it was impossible to forget all the years he had been absent, leaving me to fend for our children. As much as the idea of financial security appealed to me, I couldn't ignore the pain and anger that had built up over the years of his abandonment. So I firmly told him that while I appreciated the offer, I just couldn't forget the last 8 years. I told him that I had been raising the kids alone while juggling work, and while we may not have everything now, we did have a stable life. I told him that I couldn't risk putting myself and my children through the pain again. I wanted to protect them, and I wasn't sure if I could ever trust him not to leave us again. Robert kept pleading with me to reconsider, his eyes filled with desperation, but I knew that if I allowed him back into our lives, I would be taking a huge gamble on our family's stability. My heart ached a bit at the thought of rejecting his offer, especially considering the financial relief it could bring, but I couldn't overlook the emotional scars he had left behind. Since my meeting with Robert, my parents have been asking me to reconsider my decision to reject his offer. They keep telling me that after what he has put us through, the least he could do now was provide me and our children with a better life, free from financial worries and limitations. My parents keep arguing that people can change and perhaps Robert has realized his mistakes and truly wants to rebuild our family. They think I'm being selfish and want me to put my children's comfort above my heartbreak. I have been spending many sleepless nights wrestling with my choice. I haven't been able to bring myself to tell my children about Robert's return. I worry about how they will react to the news and how they will process the idea of their father re-entering their lives after 8 years of absence. I've been questioning my own judgment, torn between the potential benefits of accepting Robert's offer and the memories of our painful past. So Reddit, am I the a-hole for rejecting Robert's offer and possibly keeping my children and us from a better life? Update 1. In just a few days, I received thousands of comments and messages from people. I am glad that a majority of you don't think I am the a-hole. I listened to everyone's advice and decided it was time to have an open conversation with my children about Robert. The last thing I wanted was for him to reappear in their lives, taking them by surprise suddenly. Today, I sat Emily and Nathan down after dinner so I could gently broach the subject with them. I began to tell them about their father's unexpected reappearance and his offer to come back to our lives. Their faces reflected a mix of curiosity and confusion as they tried to understand what I was saying. When I told them that he had inherited the lake house and wanted to sell it to help us financially, their reactions varied. Emily, now 17 years old, exhibited a range of emotions from anger to shock. She was as confused as me and couldn't understand why Robert wanted to return to us after so many years. Although she remembered her father and sometimes missed him, she also remembered the pain she had felt in his absence. She said that she had missed having a father figure in her life initially but had eventually learned to live without him and did not want him anymore. Nathan, who was now 12 years old, told us that he didn't remember Robert at all, so he didn't care much that I had rejected the offer. He struggled to grasp the full implications of this situation. I told them frankly that whatever they decided would happen, as I respected their opinions and emotions. Emily expressed that she had absolutely no desire to meet him, and Nathan agreed, saying that he was content with how things were. I realized that although the thought of potentially mending our family was enticing, the scars from the past ran deep, and my children's well-being was paramount in my mind. I knew I had made the right choice to walk away from Robert that day in the cafe. Following this, I plan on talking to my parents about the next course of action. Contrary to popular opinion, I never planned on staying married to Robert, but he left before we could go through with a divorce. I did not have the resources to go against him then, but I have since realized that there is no point in staying married to this man anymore. Update 2. Robert's relentless calls had become increasingly desperate over the past few weeks, and no matter how much I explained to him that I did not want him back, he kept calling. As a non-confrontational person, I felt cornered and emotionally drained by his constant attempts to reach me. I was worried that he might suddenly turn up at my workplace or visit the kids at school. Hence, I decided it was time to reach out to his mother. She was aware of his return and seemed like the only person who could help me understand his motivations and deal with his relentless pursuit. I met her to inform her of my decision to end things with him legally and to express my annoyance with his constant calls. It was during this conversation that his mother revealed the real reason behind his persistence. She explained that Robert's father had added a cleverly designed clause when bequeathing him the lake house. He could become the owner of the house if and only if he returned to our family. To solidify his claim over the house, I had to sign the papers as well. This revelation left me shocked and dismayed. I finally understood why he had been pursuing me for several weeks. The primary reason he was contacting me was not out of a genuine desire to reconcile or make amends with me, but rather to secure ownership of the house. The whole situation felt like a cruel manipulation of emotions, and I needed to consider my next steps carefully. After discovering Robert's true intentions, I realized it was time to act. I didn't want to stay in a relationship anymore, driven by manipulation and secrets. I have started looking for a lawyer, as I write this, who can help me prepare for my divorce proceedings immediately. I have also talked with my parents, who regret telling me to reconsider his offer. They understand now that he hasn't changed over the years and are supportive of my decision to move forward with the divorce. They regret telling me to ever listen to him and now know that it is the right thing to walk away from him. I have blocked Robert for now so he can't disturb me anymore. I plan to see him directly when I serve him with divorce papers. Update 3. It's been 2 months since my last update, and I can finally give a happy update. As I had mentioned, I was going to serve Robert with the divorce papers, so I reached out to him in the pretext of meeting him. He immediately agreed. Emily and Nathan expressed a desire to meet their father one last time. They had many questions, and I felt it was essential for them to have some closure despite the pain of the past. We arranged for a meeting in a neutral place, a local park where we had spent many happy family moments before Robert's departure. Emily's eyes were filled with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism as she looked at her father, while Nathan clung to my side awkwardly. I started by telling him that I knew by now his real motive behind contacting us after so long. Robert protested that it wasn't just the clause in his father's will that prompted him, but he genuinely wanted us to give him a second chance. I shook my head in disbelief, knowing that I could not trust another word out of this man's mouth. I told him that we were finished and that the least he could do was give our children some closure by answering their questions. He nodded solemnly. Emily started by asking him if leaving us for another woman was worth it. Robert shamefully looked down as he answered that he was lost and had made a terrible mistake. Nathan, with a more straightforward approach, asked him if finding his happiness was more important than leaving his children with his wife. Robert took a deep breath before responding that he wasn't thinking straight at the time and admitted that he was wrong in leaving us. My children, perceptive and strong, weren't satisfied with just those answers. Robert tried to justify his affair, saying that it was his midlife crisis. As the conversation continued, Robert shared painful details of his life with Isabella, the struggles they faced, and the realization that he had been chasing an illusion. Emily and Nathan listened attentively, although I doubt they believed him. They asked him why he had never kept in touch and if he really regretted leaving us. I could feel the pain in my children's voices. Robert admitted that he had been overwhelmed by his own guilt and didn't know how to face the consequences of his actions. He reiterated that he wanted us to be whole again and that he could provide us with a luxurious life now. As I looked into my children's eyes, I knew that the decision was clear. They did not believe him, just like me, and would not allow Robert to waltz back into our lives offering money as a quick fix for the damage he had caused. It was a matter of principle, of standing up for the strength and resilience my children and I had shown over the past 8 years in his absence. Determined, I told him that we had moved on from him and did not need him or his money anymore. I served him the divorce papers as he looked at it with a mixture of remorse and disappointment. He pleaded with me that he genuinely wanted to make up for those years, but I was resolute in my decision. He then offered to split the lake house sale proceedings with me, telling me that in this way we could both benefit from it. Emily spoke up that we didn't need his charity money, and Nathan nodded in agreement, adding that we had what we needed to be happy. At this point, I guess Robert finally realized what a huge blunder he had made and started to cry. He kept apologizing to the kids, saying he had made a terrible mistake by leaving us and he understood that we could never forgive him. That day, as I walked away from the park hand in hand with Emily and Nathan, I finally felt free. It had never occurred to me the burden I had carried quietly for the sake of my children. It felt good watching my children stand up for me and have my back. Our divorce will proceed as I have decided. I know that it's going to take a while before I am freed of him legally, but in the meantime, I plan on taking some time off so I can spend some time with my children. I plan on taking them to Disneyland, a trip we have been looking forward to for a long time. I want to create beautiful memories with my children, filled with laughter and joy, to help offset the painful memories of the past. I know as long as we have each other, we can face whatever the future holds with strength and resilience. Despite the challenges and emotional turmoil we have faced, my children and I are on a path towards healing and creating a new, stable, and honest life. This chapter is far from over, but we are going to be writing our own story from now on, and I am determined to ensure it's one filled with love, trust, and growth. Update 4. Since my last update, I have some exciting news to share. I was promoted at work, and it feels like a huge accomplishment. It took me a long time to reach this position, but I am finally earning a comfortable income that allows me to provide even more for my family. The promotion not only brings financial security, but also the satisfaction of knowing that my hard work and dedication have paid off in the end. Things are going well with the divorce proceedings. I have hired an excellent lawyer who, after finding out the history between my husband and me, is confident that it will be a smooth divorce. Although it may not be a simple process, it is necessary for our closure and a fresh start. My family and friends have stood by my side throughout this time, providing support. Now that I am earning more than enough, I plan on sending my children to therapy. I understand that my children might have abandonment issues so that they can better process their emotions and work through any lingering issues. I've been researching therapists with expertise in dealing with such issues and have found a compassionate and experienced therapist who specializes in helping children and families navigate complex emotions. Meanwhile, as a parent, I believe in promoting the exploration of my children's interests other than studies. My daughter Emily has a remarkable talent for art and spends hours creating beautiful paintings that adorn our home. My son Nathan has always had a natural talent for soccer, and we spend our weekends attending his games and cheering him on. I am proud to see my children thriving in their lives. Regarding Robert, we have not been in contact, and I believe it is best to keep it that way. As many of you correctly assumed, his affair partner Isabella unexpectedly contacted me one day. The message was not an apology as one might expect, being that she was the other woman, but rather anger and resentment towards me for allegedly taking Robert away from her. She blamed me for their relationship falling apart and accused me of being the reason for his departure. In her messages, Isabella lashed out, calling me names and making hurtful accusations. She questioned my motives and claimed I had manipulated Robert into returning to our family. The messages were aggressive and unsettling, and I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the intensity of her anger. I couldn't believe that this woman had the audacity to be angry at me when she was the reason behind my family breaking up 8 years ago. I responded to her, stating that I had no desire to be with Robert and that I was in the process of getting a divorce. I reminded her of the pain and confusion that my family had gone through when Robert left us for her and told her that she had no right to contact me. I stressed how our lives had been turned upside down all those years ago and how my children had suffered as a result. I made it clear that I never wanted him back, and if she needed to blame someone, then she should blame herself and her gambling addiction. I blocked her after I sent her the message, and hopefully she won't try to contact me further. I don't want her to mess up the peaceful life my children and I have built. As for Robert's mother, I do talk to her sometimes as she has always been kind to me. She has expressed her regrets about how things have turned out and wants me to do whatever it takes to be happy. Interestingly, his mother also revealed that due to my decision not to reconcile with Robert, the lake house would not be going to him as his father had intended. This revelation was unexpected, although it also felt deserving. This man's selfish decisions had not only shattered our family but also another, so it was only fitting that he should suffer the consequences. It was time to move forward and leave the past behind. I know it is going to be a challenging journey, but the healing process is well underway. My children are growing and thriving, and our future looks brighter with each passing day. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. Story 2. My whole family dropped me and refused to talk to me when they thought I wasn't Dad's son. I grew up in a happy household. My parents loved each other deeply, and they loved my siblings and me even more. They were attentive and caring, and they always put our needs before their own. My relationship with my parents was particularly good. My dad worked long hours to provide for us, but he always made time for us when he could. He would take us on fishing trips, teach us how to play sports, and tell us stories about his own childhood. My mom, on the other hand, was the glue that held our family together. She cooked us delicious meals, helped us with our homework, and made sure that we were always clean and presentable. I loved my parents, and I knew that they loved me too. But my world came crashing down when my parents started fighting. I had always thought of them as the perfect couple. They had been together for as long as I could remember, and they rarely argued. But one day things changed. It started with small disagreements, but soon the arguments became more frequent and more intense. I tried to ignore them, but they were impossible to ignore. My mom and dad would shout at each other for hours on end, and I could hear every word from my room. One day, I heard my dad admit to having an affair years ago. My mom was livid, and she retaliated by admitting to having an affair of her own. The argument escalated until my dad questioned my paternity. I was stunned. I had never even considered the possibility that he might not be my biological father. My mom was speechless and didn't know what to say. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, but I could see the guilt and shame on her face. My dad stormed out of the house, and my mom went after him. After that day, everything changed. My siblings took my dad's side and refused to talk to me. They were angry that my parents cheated on each other, but even more so that my mom had cheated on him and that I might not be his biological son. They treated me with hostility and disdain, and I felt like an outsider in my own family. My siblings and I were caught in the middle of their argument, and it was like a bomb had exploded in our house. My mom and dad started to treat each other with hostility, and it wasn't long before their anger spilled over to us. My siblings, who had always been close to me, suddenly turned against me. They blamed me for the fact that our family was falling apart. They said that I was a reminder of my mom's affair and that I might not even be my dad's biological son. Their words hurt me deeply. I had always thought of us as a tight-knit family, but now it seemed like we were torn apart. My parents were distant and cold, and my siblings were mean and vindictive. I tried to talk to my parents, but they were always busy or distracted. They seemed to be consumed by their problems, and they didn't have time for me anymore. It was like I was invisible to them. As for my siblings, they would avoid me at all costs. They stopped inviting me to their gatherings and stopped talking to me altogether. It was like I didn't exist to them. The rejection was hard to bear, and I didn't know how to cope with it. I felt like I had lost everything: my family, my home, and my identity. I was lost and alone, and I didn't know if I could ever find my way back. At first, I tried to reach out to them. I called and texted my siblings, hoping to talk to them and sort things out, but they never answered. I tried to call my parents too, but they were always busy or out of the house. I was desperate to talk to someone, anyone who could help me make sense of what was happening. So I went to my mom's house, hoping to talk to her. She decided that some separation was much needed, but when she saw me, she told me to go away. She said that I wasn't welcome there and that I should leave. Her words were like a knife to my heart, and I couldn't believe that my mother would say something like that to me. After that, I spiraled into depression. I didn't know who I was or where I belonged. I felt like a stranger in my skin, and I didn't know how to make it go away. I stopped going to work, stopped hanging out with my friends, and stopped doing the things I loved. I spent most of my days in bed, sleeping or just staring at the ceiling. I didn't eat much and I lost a lot of weight. Months turned into a year, and I thought that I would never be able to escape the darkness that had consumed me. I hadn't heard from them in so long. I lived so close to them, but I was still so far away. My siblings and I were usually at my parents' house all the time. I missed them. I had been so consumed with my pain that I hadn't realized how much my friends had been there for me all along. They would call me, check up on me, and invite me out to do things. At first, I didn't want to go. I was content to wallow in my misery. But eventually, I started to go out with them. We would go to the movies, grab some food, or just hang out at home. They made me feel like I wasn't alone, and for that, I was grateful. I started to focus on my own well-being, seeking out therapy and support groups to help me cope with the pain of being rejected by my family. My friends were a constant source of support during this time, and I reached out to them more than ever before. At first, I was hesitant to talk about what had happened with my family. I was embarrassed and ashamed. But as time went on, I found that talking about it with my friends helped me process my feelings and move forward. They listened without judgment, offering words of comfort and encouragement. I also found solace in hobbies and activities that brought me joy. I started to play guitar again, something that I had put aside when my depression took hold. I found that playing music helped soothe my soul and provided an outlet for my emotions. As I started to take better care of myself, I noticed a gradual improvement in my mental health. The sadness and despair that had once consumed me began to lift, and I started to think about the future, about my future. My friends were there for me every step of the way, cheering me on and providing a shoulder to lean on when things got tough. They reminded me that I was not alone and that I had people who loved and cared for me, even if my family didn't. Date 1. One day, a few years later, out of the blue, my grandpa reached out to me. He said that he had had enough of the way my family had treated me and he wanted to make things right. He convinced me and my father to do a paternity test, and despite my initial hesitation, I finally agreed. I didn't want to get back into that murky situation again, but I wanted to know the truth. When the results came back positive, my family was flabbergasted. They couldn't believe their mistake. They realized the error of their ways and were remorseful for the pain they had caused me. They knew they had hurt me deeply and they were desperate to make it right. I remember feeling torn about their sudden change of heart. On the one hand, a part of me was overjoyed that my family wanted to reconcile with me. It was something that I had wanted for so long and it felt like a dream come true. But on the other hand, I couldn't forget the hurt and betrayal that I had felt when they had abandoned me. Despite their apologies and pleading, I remained hesitant. I didn't know if I was ready to forgive and forget. I had moved on and built a life for myself, and I didn't know if I wanted to let my family back in. I was afraid that history would repeat itself and I would be left hurt and alone once again. But even as I struggled with my emotions, my family persisted. They begged me to give them a chance to make things right, and they promised to do whatever it took to earn my forgiveness. I remember feeling overwhelmed by their persistence. It hurt me to hear that they had moved on without me, as if I had never existed. It made me feel left out and unwanted. Despite their pleas for forgiveness, I declined to get back in touch with them. I didn't want to risk getting hurt all over again. They dropped me once. They could drop me again. I told them that they could continue without me like they had all these years. It would make no difference. I had found a new family in my friends, and they were the ones who had been there for me every step of the way. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Would I be the a-hole if I exposed the family secret after over 10 years to clear my mom's name? Very long story. I apologize in advance. Also, this is a throwaway account because I'm scared. Family background. My family and I, 24F, came to the US over 20 years ago. The only family we had here was a couple of my dad's, 55M siblings. Long story short, my dad and my uncle, his brother, were very, very close. My uncle has a stepson, let's name him John, who is a little younger than my mom. My mom's turning 50 soon, for reference. John has a wife who's a little younger than him. We'll call her M. John and M have kids together, but they never got married. John and his wife lived in an apartment above ours, which meant that we spent almost every single day together. M was like my second mom at this point. Now on to the good part. About 10 years ago, we noticed that M, John, and their family didn't want to hang out around as much as before. We never thought anything of it since they moved to another city neighboring ours. Within a couple of months, M cut us off completely. It was very weird and not at all like her. My mom still had no idea what actually happened, or why M and all of their mutual friends completely cut off my mom. This was a group of about 10 PDA moms that did everything together. Fast forward 2 years, one of those moms, the only one who still talks to my mom, finally opened up to her. She said that M started a rumor that my mom and John slept together, and that's why she stopped talking to us. She told my mom about how every month when they have their PDA meeting, this rumor had to be a topic every single time. My mom's friend said she stood up to them and ruined her relationship with all of them because of it. My mom swears on everything that never happened, and I believe her. The irony of this situation is that there is proof that M and my dad were having an affair. John has all the evidence, and the only people who know about it are John, my mom, and I. Of course, M and my dad know that we know as well. We've known about this affair for years, but my mom never wanted it to come out because it would ruin my dad's reputation, but she doesn't care about hers. Now everyone that knew M and my mom know that my mom is the cheater and the worst wife ever, when in reality the only real cheaters were my dad and M. My parents separated right after my mom found out about the affair, but this wasn't the only issue in their marriage. However, John and Em are still together and actually got married about a year ago. My mom is prepared to take this family secret to the grave, but I'm not. Would it be wrong of me to just expose them and my dad after all this time? I kind of want everyone to see who I really is, since this isn't even the worst thing she's done. But my mom says it's been too long at this point and I should leave it alone. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My wife cheated on me with my best man at our wedding. Now she's humiliated by her family. Hey, I'm a 28-year-old guy who was supposed to be in Hawaii right now for my honeymoon with Brenda, my 27-year-old wife. Brenda has beautiful brown hair, and I was so excited to spend my life with her. We got married yesterday, which should have been the best day ever, but things went horribly wrong. Right after we got married, I found out that Brenda had cheated on me with my best man just before we were supposed to say our vows. Can you imagine? We had a big 2-day wedding planned with a bachelor party one day and the actual wedding the next. The rule was that Brenda and I shouldn't see each other at all during these 2 days until we met at the wedding altar. So here's what happened. We both had our own parties at the same place but in different areas. The groomsmen and bridesmaids could go back and forth between the two, but Brenda and I were supposed to stay apart. Both parties were really fun. We partied hard, had a lot to drink, and I even passed out at midnight. The next morning, I got up, got dressed, and was all set to meet Brenda's parents and go through with the wedding. But then everything just fell apart when I learned about the cheating. It turned what was supposed to be my happiest day into a total nightmare. So, after the wedding ceremony, we all went to pick up Brenda's grandparents from the airport, and then we headed back for a big lunch celebration with our friends and family. Everyone was toasting to our happiness, and it seemed like a perfect day up until then. But then things took a turn. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, and that's when I overheard a couple of janitors talking. They were gossiping about something shocking. They said they saw the bride, my new wife, making out with my best man in the restroom. One janitor was totally sure he saw Brenda in her wedding dress kissing the best man right there. The other janitor mentioned seeing the best man early in the morning in Brenda's room, and at first he thought it was me, the groom, but obviously it wasn't. I just stood there in the restroom listening to all this, feeling shocked and heartbroken. When I finally stepped out, the janitors were super surprised to see me. They quickly left the area, looking really awkward. I looked around to see if there were any cameras in the restroom that could prove this, but there weren't any. However, I noticed a camera in the lobby outside the restroom. Driven by a mix of anger and desperation, I rushed to the room where Brenda had stayed the night before to find out more about what had happened. With the memory of the janitor's gossip still fresh, I spotted a camera outside Brenda's room, hoping it might have captured something. I called our wedding manager. I asked him to get the recordings from both the camera near the restroom and the one outside Brenda's room. He seemed hesitant at first, but after seeing how upset I was, he agreed to help me out. I really didn't want to go back to the lunch where everyone was celebrating, but I also didn't want to make a big scene in front of all our guests. So I went back to the table. Sitting there, I couldn't stop watching Brenda and my best man. They were chatting and laughing like nothing had happened. It was like a punch in the gut seeing them so carefree. I felt so alone. The two people who were supposed to be my closest allies on this important day had betrayed me. It seemed like everyone else was having a great time, dancing and enjoying themselves. They even tried to get me to join in, noticing I looked upset and asking if I was okay. I just said I was tired and sat out. Then my best man had the nerve to ask Brenda to dance, and she said yes. Watching them dance together, knowing what I knew, was unbearable. If only I hadn't overheard that conversation, I might have been out there dancing too, happy and oblivious. But there I was, feeling like my whole world had just flipped upside down. Seeing Brenda and my best man dancing together felt like a punch to the stomach. The more they laughed and moved to the music, the more I couldn't help but imagine what might have happened between them the night before. It was torture, and I was trapped in these horrible thoughts, imagining all the ways they might have betrayed me. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from the wedding manager. He had the recordings. I quickly asked him to meet me in my room, away from the party and the painful sight of Brenda and the best man together. I hurried back to my room, my heart pounding. The wedding manager arrived shortly after with the footage. I thanked him, took the recordings, and asked him to leave. I also told him to let anyone who asked know that I wanted to be alone. He nodded and quietly left the room. I locked the door behind him. My hands were shaking as I prepared to play the recordings. I knew that whatever I saw next could change my life forever. I played the footage from the wedding day, focusing first on the lobby outside the restroom. I watched as my best man entered the men's restroom. One by one, others left, and soon he was alone. It looked like he waited until the restroom was empty, locked the door from inside, and then made a call, probably to Brenda. I braced myself, knowing that what I might see next could confirm my worst fears. Seeing Brenda sneak into the restroom and then locked in there with my best man for nearly 10 to 12 minutes shattered me. During that time, other guests tried to use the restroom, only to find the door bolted shut. Eventually, the janitor had to come, tried knocking with no answer, and then had to direct others to use a different restroom upstairs. When the janitor finally unlocked the door, Brenda rushed out as if nothing had happened. But to me, it was clear what had transpired. I was heartbroken, tears streaming down my face as the truth of their betrayal hit me. Driven by a need to know everything, I played the footage from the night before. Confirmed my worst fears. It wasn't just a momentary lapse. They had planned it. I watched them making out in the lobby on their way to her room, his hands all over her. The thought of what likely continued inside her room overwhelmed me, and I broke down completely. Alone in my room, I cried uncontrollably, mourning the loss of the two most important relationships in my life on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Meanwhile, my door echoed with knocks, and my phone blared with endless texts and calls, but I couldn't face anyone. I just stood there crying and cursing my fate, completely devastated. After sending the event manager to ask everyone to give me some space, the knocking finally stopped. But Brenda wouldn't stop. She kept texting me, trying to check on me. Overwhelmed and unable to deal with it anymore, I switched off my phone to get a moment of peace. However, I couldn't stay put for long. Restlessness got the better of me, and I stormed out of my room, desperate for some fresh air and a change of scenery. When I stepped outside, I noticed that most of the guests had already left. Only a few family members remained, our parents, siblings, and some close friends. The best man had disappeared too. Brenda was there crying, surrounded by her maid of honor and her parents, who were trying to console her. As I approached, everyone turned their attention towards me. My mom came up to me, full of concern, asking what had happened. Brenda, however, stayed back, likely knowing what was coming next. I couldn't hold back any longer. In a moment of raw emotion, I looked straight at Brenda and said sarcastically, "I'm really enjoying the marriage right now." Her tears intensified, and as the questions started flying from everyone around, I turned my phone back on. Taking a deep breath, I showed her father the footage of Brenda making out in the lobby with the best man. The shock and disgust on his face said it all. Without another word, I got in my car and drove away from the venue, leaving behind the chaos and the shattered pieces of what was supposed to be my new life. The event manager called me for the final settlement, and I asked him to take it from the bride. Putting up a show at the venue, I don't know who paid the settlement and what happened afterward because I haven't spoken to anyone since leaving the place. I drove off more than 200 miles to a remote countryside and have been staying here since yesterday afternoon. I left the venue in my wedding suit, so on the way, I got rid of it and changed into my gym clothes lying in the trunk. My condition is just so pathetic. I haven't spoken to anyone. The last meal I had was my wedding lunch. I wanted to visit the pastor for the annulment process but just don't have any motivation to move my butt. We had our flight to Hawaii this morning, and in the middle of all this chaos, I forgot to cancel it. In fact, I woke up today with the final calls from airlines to board the flight. That money went to waste. I canceled the hotel bookings but got nil returns because I was canceling them post-check-in time. I got some money back only for the return flight from Hawaii and some water sports bookings. Otherwise, I lost everything in the true sense. Anyway, monetary loss is nothing compared to the mental stress that I'm going through. I don't know how I'm going to deal with all this trauma. My head is hurting so bad. This loneliness is killing me, but I don't want to talk or meet with anyone. I don't know how to explain my situation. You don't have to explain your situation. She just did the most incredibly terrible thing to you. Now for the updates. Update 1. Hey there. Thanks for sticking with me while I share my pretty tough story. Things have been really rough. I'm still feeling down, but I'm a bit better than when I first ran away to a random place last week. I ended up at a cheap motel next to the highway where lots of truck drivers and people on road trips stopped for the night. I didn't really care about where I was staying. I just needed to get away from everything that was familiar. A couple of days after I arrived, I realized I needed to grab some basic stuff and maybe get some food because I hadn't eaten properly. The motel had a little supermarket downstairs, so I went there. By then, I smelled pretty bad because I'd been drinking a lot and hadn't showered. After I cleaned up, I decided it was time to sort out the mess with the wedding. I went to see the pastor who married us. He was really shocked when I told him what went down after the ceremony. I told him straight up that I wanted to act like the wedding never happened. I didn't really know the rules about getting a marriage annulled. The pastor explained that an annulment is a way to cancel a marriage like it never existed, but it's only allowed in specific situations like if there was a fraud, if someone was forced into it, or if the vows were made without really understanding them because someone was drunk or high. I brought up the idea to the pastor that maybe my situation could count as fraud since she cheated right before we said our vows. But it turned out things were a bit more complicated because we had officially registered our marriage at the magistrate's office, following all the legal steps. That meant an annulment wasn't possible, and I'd have to go through the divorce process instead. This also meant I'd inevitably have to deal with her again, which I was dreading. Left with no other choice, I went to my parents' place to figure things out. They were really worried about me. My dad, being incredibly supportive, offered to help in any way he could. Knowing he had lots of connections, I asked if he could hook me up with a lawyer. Lucky for me, Dad is a businessman and knows a few good attorneys. He gave me the contact of a lawyer who specializes in divorce cases. It turned out my dad had already talked to him about my situation, so the lawyer was all prepped and ready to help. Dad reassured me that everything was set for a quick and straightforward divorce because the marriage hadn't been consummated. I met with the lawyer, and he was super confident about handling everything smoothly. He started on the paperwork right away and told me the divorce papers would be sent to her within a week. He also made it clear that he'd make sure I wouldn't have to pay any alimony. In fact, he was going to argue that she should pay for half of the wedding costs. When the whole wedding debacle unfolded, my dad stepped in to handle the financials since I had paid for the entire wedding myself. That's why my lawyer is pushing to get half of those expenses back from Brenda as part of the divorce settlement. It turns out that after I left the venue, my dad also took care of the payment to the wedding planner. The situation with Brenda escalated quickly. Her parents were so upset by her actions that they left the venue immediately, essentially disowning her on the spot. Her maid of honor ended up taking her home. Meanwhile, my family, including my parents and grandparents, were left to pick up my belongings and finalize everything with the planner. When everything settled down a bit, my mom handed me the keys to my house, which Brenda had sent to my parents' house. Brenda also called my mom, apologizing for everything and asking for help to reconcile with me. However, my mom told her she wouldn't interfere and that it would be up to me to decide the future of our relationship. As for questions about my best man, well, he's been my buddy since college and we've been close for about 10 years. He moved to Seattle after we graduated, but we've kept in touch, and whenever he's back in town, we hang out like old times. He was even more excited about my wedding than I was. It's hard to imagine how everything turned so sour considering our long history and the excitement leading up to the big day. He came down a week before the wedding to help me out with shopping and other preparations. He's always been more like family than just a friend. This wasn't the first time he had met Brenda. They'd hung out with me numerous times before whenever he visited. Honestly, I've been struggling to understand what he was thinking when he betrayed me right before the wedding. At that time, though, all I really wanted was to find some peace of mind. Brenda and I had been together for 2.5 years, and even after deciding to get married, we waited another 5 months. During all those years, I never saw any warning signs. He was always nice and respectful, and never inappropriate with any of my friends. Even when he was the best man, nothing seemed off until everything fell apart. I returned to my now empty house, which felt haunted by memories. The last time I was here, we were so excited, planning our wedding and dreaming about our future. Now everything was shattered. The next day, my mom came over and stayed with me for the next few weeks. She took care of everything Brenda had left behind and even helped renovate the place a bit. Her presence was a huge comfort during such a tough time. Clearing out the house and sorting through everything was a big help, and it gradually helped me start to feel like I was getting back in control of my life. The first proactive step I took was joining a fitness club. I figured it was better to drain all those swirling negative thoughts through intense workouts rather than let them consume me. I wasn't really out of shape before, but I was a bit chubby. Since starting my workouts, I've already lost 5 pounds, which feels great. Keeping busy has been crucial for me. When the divorce papers finally reached her, Brenda texted me asking if we could meet. It was the first time I had heard from her since the wedding day disaster. Her message broke me down all over again. I had been ignoring her, trying to act as if she didn't exist, like she was a ghost. But her text made all the emotions come flooding back. Despite everything, I agreed to meet her. She looked frail and tired during our meeting. I kept my expression neutral, answering her questions with short, one-word responses. The conversation felt incredibly awkward. I don't even know what came over me, but I ended up bringing up the cheating bluntly, asking her how she ended up with him. It was a question that had been haunting me, and somehow in that moment I just needed to ask. Hearing Brenda's response was tough. She was clearly ashamed and broke down as she explained. She told me she had never cheated on me before and had never planned to. She wanted to stay loyal to me for life, but she explained when she shared her commitment fears with her bridesmaids, they shockingly suggested that she should have one last fling before committing to marriage. At her bachelorette party, her friends apparently told my best man that Brenda was looking for a final hookup before tying the knot. He responded casually, saying he was available, thinking it was all just playful banter. But that just set off something more serious between them. They started flirting, initially as part of the game in front of everyone else at the party. However, once they were alone, they couldn't stop themselves. Brenda told me that what was meant to be a bit of fun spiraled into them spending the night together. It happened while I was out cold from my own bachelor party. I'd gone to bed early since I needed to wake up to pick up my grandparents from the airport. Meanwhile, my best man, not yet ready to call it a night, went over to the bachelorette party. What started as a game turned into a full-blown betrayal. This revelation was a lot to process, making the situation even more painful and complicated. Brenda's confession and the unfolding of events left me questioning many things, even wondering if I should blame myself for having gone to bed early that night. But deep down, I knew that wasn't really the issue. After she finished explaining, Brenda looked at me with such sadness and asked if there was any chance we could try again, to start over. Couldn't. I told her no, I could never trust her again, and without trust, there's no foundation for a relationship. It would be futile to even try. It's hard to admit, but this whole ordeal has made me bitter towards her, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Maybe one day I'll be able to forgive her, but forgetting and trusting again is out of the question. She cried, and so did I, but I had to stay firm. In the end, she signed the divorce papers and sent them back to my lawyer. Now the divorce is final. I'm trying to move forward, taking it one day at a time. I'm focusing on my work, improving my skills, and keeping a close eye on my drinking, which had gotten worse during the divorce process. My mom thinks I should start meeting new people and dating again, but I'm not ready to jump back into the dating scene. For now, I just need time to heal and rebuild my life on my own terms. Update 2. Hello everyone. I know it's been some time since my last update. Here, after my divorce from Brenda, there really hasn't been much to report. We completely lost touch after she moved out. She stayed with her best friend while our divorce was finalized, and that's the last I heard about her whereabouts. I decided it was best for my healing to block her on all social media platforms. As for the guy she had the affair with, my former best man, he disappeared from my life right after the wedding. The last memory I have of him is seeing him dance with Brenda at the wedding. I assumed she must have told him about the divorce, and sometimes I wondered if they ended up together. That thought bothered me for quite a while, but I've worked through those feelings of insecurity. Recently, I ran into a college friend who knew both me and the affair partner. He was actually at the wedding too. I haven't been keeping up with anyone or even checking social media much since everything went down. This friend filled me in on some surprising news. The affair partner was cheated on and dumped by his own fiancée. It's an ironic twist, and hearing it was a strange mix of emotions. It's not something I take joy in, but it did give me a sense of closure, knowing that sometimes life has a way of balancing things out. I'm just focusing on moving forward, taking things one day at a time. That's quite the update, and it certainly adds another layer to the whole situation. It turns out a few of the groomsmen were aware of the affair between my former best man and Brenda the night before the wedding. After I locked myself in my room during the reception, they pieced together what had happened. When word of my divorce spread, it all clicked for them. My college friend who filled me in on all of this had lost touch with the affair partner after the wedding chaos. However, by a twist of fate, he ended up working at the same company as the affair partner. It was there that he learned about his recent engagement and its abrupt end. The affair partner had gotten engaged to a coworker, but just a day after the engagement, they split up, and the planned wedding for this month was called off. During an office party, the affair partner, having had too much to drink, confessed to my friend that his fiancée had cheated on him, which was the reason for their breakup. It's a harsh reality and an ironic twist, considering his past actions. This whole saga has been a lot to process, and hearing these developments, while shocking, does bring some strange sense of poetic justice. Now more than ever, I'm focused on moving forward and leaving all this drama firmly in the past. The friend tried consoling me, saying that the affair partner was hit by karma because of what he had done to me. I said I had moved on from the feeling of revenge and betrayal. When I was being cheated upon, I desperately wanted to ruin the affair partner's life, but now I just don't care about him or Brenda. Both are ghosts to me and don't exist for me. To update the people who have read it, I'm dating this wonderful girl from my office. She's a brave single mother, mom of an adorable daughter, and I can't stop gushing over both of their cuteness and mannerisms. It's too early to say whether I want to marry her or not, but she definitely lives my life with her presence. Last month, I invited her over to my parents for dinner, and my parents just love her daughter. It was a happy sight, and I want to seal this deal, but we are both very skeptical and don't want to rush into things. We probably take a couple of years more before we decide to marry, if at all. Fingers crossed, but we might start living together soon. I will make an update if anything progresses. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My 43 female wife told me 46 male that she feels much safer going out with her girlfriends than with me. Are her concerns fair? My wife and I have been married for over 20 years and have a daughter away in college. Since we became empty nesters, we have been traveling a bit more and doing things. We live in the suburbs, but it's only a short trip to a big city in a bustling downtown area. I work from home doing remote work on my computer as a programmer, and she works in the city. Some nights she goes out and tries new restaurants or bars with a small group of girlfriends, and then she would recommend places she's been to for our once-a-week date nights. The issue is that she has been acting strange about us going together to some of the same places she has gone, sometimes multiple times, with her girlfriends. She'd make excuses to try to downplay the experience she had when she raved about it earlier. Sometimes she suggested doing date night at a nearby mall, which she has hated in the past. That was her date night location for many years. We drive her teen daughter to hang out at the mall, and we go to the Cheesecake Factory or occasionally a higher-end Italian place that opened up, but it was still a chain. So I confronted her, and she said that she was trying to spare my feelings and that she feels safer being out with her girlfriends than she does with me. One of the last restaurants in the city we went to date night out was a very large homeless problem nearby. How you can't get there without encountering them. We had an encounter with one guy who would not take no for an answer, and I thought I did pretty well because it got him to eventually leave us alone, but apparently a similar thing happened in their girl group, and one of their friends turned around and quite loudly and forcefully told him to stop following them, and he just scampered off and muttered something. Once she was getting it off her chest, he seemed apologetic but then almost angry because I guess he was bottling it up for a long time. She then told me that she never felt comfortable with me traveling with her daughter last year to her new college to move in and get settled in, but since I was able to work remotely, it was easier for me to go. She held her tongue about how she felt to spare my feelings. She told me that the only way she felt good about it was knowing that her daughter took a women's self-defense course and that she knew what to look out for while I always looked like a tourist in new places. I got defensive and told her that I traveled for work to cities around the world that were more dangerous than America, including India. She then immediately said that I was with a group and now you have to see my point. She asked how I'd feel if we went as a couple to India, and I said I'd feel responsible for her safety. She said that is how she feels about me when we go out. When she is with me alone, she feels responsible for me because she loves me, not because she thinks I'm a coward and would run away, but simply that this is something that she does better at than I do. She said that she wants to relax when she goes out and not be responsible for someone. She doesn't feel that way with her girlfriends at all. She knew this would crush me to hear it, so she tried to avoid it. She said that she is more used to the city, more used to dealing with sketchy-looking men, more aware of their surroundings, and frankly more capable of fighting if it came to that. That last one really shocked me, but I've never been in a fight. I've gotten bullied and beaten up in the past, but I was never in a fight. She has 5 boys back when she was in school and held her own. She's also very much into working out and fitness, and I sat at a computer for work and have to work long hours. I go to the gym sometimes, and the one thing that I have going for me is that I am tall, but I've never been able to put on much muscle or build strength. I'd love to hear from women in a similar situation as my wife. You may feel that you're more capable than your husband or boyfriend, and how do you handle it? And do you think my wife is overreacting or being fair? It hurt my pride, but I can also see her point to it. Makes me want to do better at making her more confident in me. But realistically, my work schedule is super crazy right now. Ita came back to look at the responses after being away today, and it's insane the number of people who immediately assume she must be cheating and this is all some elaborate excuse. It makes no sense. There are easier ways for someone to conceal cheating than all of this if that is what she wanted to do. What a toxic place this is. Just all the same, you might want to double-check your wife and make sure that she's not cheating on you, my friend. Women are attracted to men who make them feel safe, and it doesn't sound like you're making her feel safe. So you might want to double-check everything. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.